Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to know. Don't just sit back, tell me where in the world you are. Now, let's dive into the story. Estelle stood in the doorway of their modest apartment, watching her husband Matthieu load groceries into his mother's brand new silver sedan. The car gleamed under the Paris streetlights, like a trophy she had never been allowed to touch. Her hands trembled as she gripped the doorframe, trying to steady herself. They hadn't bought groceries in 3 weeks. Their daughters, Céline and Maëlys, had eaten pasta with butter for dinner again last night. Yet there it was, a 40,000 euro car parked in front of Giselle's building, wrapped in a bow that might as well have been made from Estelle's dignity. Matthieu closed the trunk and turned toward her, his face blank. No guilt, no explanation, just the cold expression of a man who had already made his choice and didn't think he owed anyone an answer. Estelle forced herself to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "Matthieu, we don't have money for groceries this week. The girls need food." She hated how small she sounded, how desperate, but she had no choice. The cabinets were empty. The fridge held only condiments and half a carton of milk. He walked toward her slowly, hands in his pockets, as if she had just asked him about the weather. When he reached the doorway, he stopped inches from her face. His breath smelled like coffee and cigarette smoke. "My mother raised me. She sacrificed everything for me. You're just my wife. You'll always have what you need, but she comes first. Always." The words landed like stones in her chest, each one heavier than the last. Estelle's vision blurred with tears, but she refused to let them fall. Not in front of him. Not anymore. She thought about the nights she had stayed up sewing their daughters' school uniforms because they couldn't afford new ones. She thought about the lunches she had skipped so Céline and Maëlys could have seconds. She thought about the bruises on her pride every time Giselle came to visit and pointed out everything Estelle couldn't provide. And now this, a car. A brand new car for a woman who already had everything while Estelle's children went hungry. Matthieu stepped past her into the apartment, brushing her shoulder as if she were furniture in his way. He grabbed his jacket from the hook and turned back one last time. "I'm staying at my mother's tonight. She wants help setting up the car's features." He didn't wait for a response. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving Estelle alone in the silence. She pressed her back against the wall and slid to the floor, finally letting the tears come. But even as she cried, something else stirred deep in her chest, something sharp and unbreakable, a quiet voice that whispered, "This cannot be how your story ends."
Estelle met Matthieu 7 years ago at a cafe in Montmartre. She had been a graphic designer then, living in a tiny studio with dreams bigger than her bank account. He was charming, quick with compliments, and persistent in a way that felt romantic at the time. He told her she was beautiful when she wore no makeup. He told her she was smart when she talked about her work. He told her he wanted to build a life with someone real, not one of those shallow women who only cared about money. She believed him because she wanted to, because loneliness makes you believe in people who speak the language of hope. They married within a year, and Estelle thought she had finally found her safe place. But the cracks appeared slowly, like frost spreading across glass. First, Matthieu suggested she quit her job to focus on starting a family. He said her income wasn't necessary. He made enough for both of them. Estelle hesitated, but agreed, trusting that marriage meant partnership. Then came Giselle. Matthieu's mother was a widow who wore her suffering like armor. She had raised Matthieu alone after his father died in a factory accident, and she never let anyone forget it. From the moment Estelle entered the family, Giselle made it clear, no woman would ever be good enough for her son. At family dinners, Giselle would sigh dramatically and say things like, Matthieu, you used to love my cooking. I suppose some things change when you have a wife. Estelle would smile politely, swallowing the humiliation with her wine. When Siliani was born, Estelle hoped things would improve. Surely a grandchild would soften Giselle's heart, but instead it gave her more ammunition. Giselle criticized everything: how Estelle dressed the baby, how she fed her, how she sang to her at night. Matthieu never defended his wife. He would laugh awkwardly and say, "Maman knows best. She raised me, didn't she?" Estelle felt herself shrinking with each visit, becoming smaller and quieter until she barely recognized the woman in the mirror. By the time Milas was born, Estelle had stopped arguing. She had stopped asking Matthieu to choose her over his mother. She had learned to survive in the margins of her own marriage, taking up as little space as possible. But survival isn't the same as living. And tonight, standing alone in that empty apartment with hunger gnawing at her daughters' bellies, Estelle realized she had been surviving for far too long. Something had to change. Someone had to fight. And the only person left to do it was her.
The next morning, Estelle woke to find Silian and Maëlys already awake, sitting on the couch with their school bags packed. They were 7 and 5, old enough to understand that something was wrong, but too young to name it. Silian looked at her mother with eyes that held too much worry for a child. "Mama, is Papa coming home today?" Estelle forced a smile and kissed her daughter's forehead. "Maybe, my love. We'll see." But she knew he wouldn't. Not today. Maybe not ever. She opened the refrigerator and stared at its contents. 1 egg, a wilted carrot, and that half carton of milk. She cracked the egg into a pan and divided it between her daughters, giving each of them half with a small piece of bread she found in the back of the freezer. They ate silently, not complaining, and that broke her heart more than anything. Children shouldn't know how to swallow disappointment with their breakfast. They should be loud and demanding and confident that their needs matter. After dropping the girls at school, Estelle walked to the supermarket, not to shop, she had no money, but to think. She wandered the aisles, looking at the things she couldn't afford: fresh vegetables, chicken breasts, chocolate bars her daughters would love. Other women filled their carts with ease, chatting on their phones, laughing with their children. Estelle felt like a ghost, watching life happen to other people. In the checkout line, she saw a flyer for a women's legal aid clinic. Free consultations, no judgment. She folded it carefully and tucked it into her pocket. Then she walked home through the cold Paris streets, past Giselle's building where that silver car sat parked like a monument to everything Estelle would never have. She stopped in front of it, staring at her reflection in the polished door. The woman looking back at her was thin and tired, with shadows under her eyes and lips pressed into a hard line. But there was something else there too, a flicker of something dangerous: determination, rage, hope. Estelle didn't know what she would do yet, but she knew she couldn't keep living like this. Her daughters deserved better. She deserved better. And if Matthieu and Giselle thought they had broken her, they were about to learn what happens when a woman decides she's done being invisible. She pulled out her phone and dialed the number on the flyer. When the woman answered, Estelle's voice was steady. "I need help, and I'm ready to fight."
Giselle Blanchard lived in a 3-bedroom apartment in the 16th arrondissement, a neighborhood Estelle could never afford, even when she was working. The building had marble floors and an elevator with velvet cushions. Giselle's apartment was decorated like a museum. Antique furniture, crystal vases, and photographs of Matthieu at every age displayed like religious icons. There were no photos of Estelle or the girls. They had never been invited into the shrine. Matthieu had always made excuses for his mother. "She's been through a lot," he would say. "She sacrificed everything for me after Papa died. The least I can do is make her comfortable." Estelle used to nod and agree. not realizing that comfortable meant Giselle received monthly payments from Matthieu's salary while his own children wore hand-me-downs. Not realizing that sacrifice was a weapon Giselle wielded to control her son's every decision. Giselle had never worked a day since her husband's death. The insurance payout and Matthieu's support had kept her in luxury for 2 decades. She spent her days shopping, having lunch with friends, and attending charity events where she spoke eloquently about the importance of helping struggling families. The irony was lost on no one except Matthieu, who saw his mother as a saint who could do no wrong. Estelle remembered the first time she tried to talk to Matthieu about money. They had been married 2 years, and she noticed the bank statements showed large transfers to Giselle every month. When she asked about it, Matthieu's face had darkened. "That's none of your business," he said. "That's my mother. She needs me." Estelle tried to explain that they needed savings too, that they should think about their future children. But Matthieu cut her off. "My mother comes first. If you can't accept that, maybe you're not the woman I thought you were." She learned to stop asking. She learned to ignore the designer handbags Giselle showed off while Estelle wore the same 3 dresses on rotation. She learned to smile when Giselle bragged about the vacations Matthieu paid for while his own family stayed home every summer. She learned to make herself small and quiet and grateful for the scraps of attention Matthieu gave her between visits to his mother's apartment. But learning to accept injustice doesn't make it hurt less. It just teaches you to carry the pain in silence until it becomes so heavy you can't stand up anymore. The legal aid clinic was located above a bakery in the 11th arrondissement. Estelle climbed the narrow stairs, her heart pounding with each step. She had never done anything like this before, never challenged Matthieu, never sought help outside their marriage, never admitted that her life had become unbearable. The waiting room smelled like coffee and old books. 3 other women sat in plastic chairs, each one wearing the same expression of exhausted determination. A woman in her 50s called Estelle's name. Matthieu Rousseau had kind eyes and a firm handshake. Her office was small but organized, with law books stacked neatly on shelves and a framed photo of 2 teenage girls on her desk. "Tell me everything," she said, pulling out a yellow notepad. Estelle took a deep breath and began. She told her about the car, the empty refrigerator, the monthly payments to Giselle, the years of being told she didn't matter. Matthieu Rousseau listened without interruption, taking notes in quick, precise handwriting. When Estelle finished, the lawyer looked up and said something that changed everything. "This is financial abuse, and it's illegal." Estelle felt the words hit her like a wave. Financial abuse. She had never had language for what was happening to her. She thought it was just marriage, just the way things were supposed to be when you loved someone. Matthieu Rousseau explained that French law protected women in situations like Estelle's. Matthieu had a legal obligation to support his family. The money he was sending to his mother while his children went hungry could be challenged in court. They could file for emergency support, force him to pay child support even while they were still married, and potentially build a case for divorce with favorable terms. But, Matthieu Rousseau warned, this won't be easy. He'll fight you. His mother will fight you. You need to be ready. Estelle thought about Siliane and Malise. She thought about the way they had learned to ask for less, to expect less, to believe they deserved less. She thought about the woman she used to be before marriage taught her to disappear. Then she looked at Matthieu Rousseau and said, "I'm ready." The lawyer smiled, not with pity, but with respect. "Good, then let's begin." For the first time in years, Estelle felt like she wasn't drowning. She was building a raft, and she was going to save herself.
Maître Rousseau worked fast. Within 3 days, Matthieu received a legal notice at his mother's apartment. Estelle wasn't there when he opened it, but she could imagine his face. The shock, the anger, the disbelief that his quiet, obedient wife had dared to challenge him. The notice demanded immediate financial support for Céliane and Maëlys, documentation of all financial transactions from the past 5 years, and a formal explanation of why he was supporting his mother while his children lacked basic necessities. That evening, Matthieu showed up at the apartment unannounced. He didn't knock. He used his key and burst through the door like a storm. Estelle was helping Maëlys with homework at the kitchen table. She looked up calmly, though her heart was racing. "We need to talk," Matthieu said, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. Estelle stood slowly, placing herself between him and her daughters. "The girls have school tomorrow. Whatever you need to say it quickly." He threw the legal papers on the table. "What the hell is this?" Estelle picked them up and glanced at them, though she had already memorized every word. "It's a request for you to support your children, something you should have been doing all along." Matthieu laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Support? I've been supporting this family for years. Who paid for this apartment? Who pays the rent? Who bought your mother a 40,000 euro car while your daughters ate pasta for weeks?" Estelle interrupted, her voice sharp as broken glass. "Who sends your mother on vacation while your children wear shoes with holes in them? Who chose his mother's comfort over his children's hunger?" The words hung in the air like accusations carved in stone. Matthieu's face went pale, then red. "My mother sacrificed everything for me. Everything! You don't understand what she went through." "I don't care," Estelle said quietly. "I don't care about her sacrifices anymore. Your daughters are sacrificing their childhood because you can't say no to a woman who has manipulated you your entire life, and I'm done being silent about it." Matthieu stepped closer, his fists clenched at his sides. For a moment, Estelle thought he might hit her, but she didn't move. She didn't flinch. She stared at him with eyes that had finally stopped begging for scraps of love. "If you touch me," she said softly, "I will make sure the judge knows. Now get out of my house."
The next day, Giselle showed up. She didn't call first, she never did. She treated Estelle's home like an extension of her own kingdom, a place where her authority was absolute. She rang the doorbell 3 times in quick succession, the way she always did when she was angry. Estelle considered not answering, but she knew Giselle would just keep ringing. She opened the door to find her mother-in-law standing there in a cream-colored coat and pearl earrings, looking like she was on her way to brunch with the mayor. "How dare you?" Giselle said, pushing past Estelle into the apartment. "How dare you drag my son to court like some common criminal?" Estelle closed the door and turned to face her. "Your son abandoned his children to buy you a car. I'm not dragging him anywhere. I'm asking him to be a father." Giselle's eyes flashed with contempt. "You ungrateful little girl. Do you know what I've been through? Do you know what it was like to raise a child alone? Do you know what it's like to watch your children go hungry?" Estelle shot back. "Do you know what it's like to choose between electricity and food? Do you know what it's like to be told you don't matter by the man who promised to love you?" Her voice broke on the last word, but she didn't cry. She was done crying in front of these people. Giselle stepped closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Matthieu deserves better than you. He always has. I told him not to marry you, but he was too kind, too generous. He felt sorry for you, a nobody, with no family, no money, no prospects. And this is how you repay him? By trying to steal what's mine?" Estelle felt something crack open inside her. Not weakness, but clarity. She finally understood. This was never about sacrifice or love. This was about control. Giselle had spent 20 years training her son to put her first, and Estelle's existence threatened that carefully constructed kingdom. "Get out." Estelle said quietly. Giselle blinked, surprised. Excuse me? Estelle walked to the door and opened it. Get out of my home. You're not welcome here anymore. Not until you can look at your granddaughters and admit that they deserve more than your leftovers. Giselle's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Then she grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door. Before she left, she turned back one last time. You'll regret this. I'll make sure of it. Estelle met her gaze without flinching. I already regret marrying into your family. At least now I'm doing something about it.
The court hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, Estelle's life became a careful balancing act between survival and preparation. Maître Rousseau requested bank statements, receipts, and any documentation of financial neglect. Estelle spent hours going through old papers, building a case against the man she had once loved. Each document was another piece of evidence, another proof that her suffering had been real and documented, and undeniable. Matthieu stopped paying rent. It was his first act of retaliation, a message that said, "If you fight me, I'll destroy you." Estelle called Maître Rousseau in a panic, and the lawyer filed an emergency motion. The judge ordered Matthieu to continue payments until the hearing, but the damage was done. Estelle now lived with the constant fear that he would find another way to punish her for speaking up. The girls started asking questions. Why doesn't Papa come home anymore? Céliane asked one night as Estelle tucked her into bed. Estelle struggled to find words that were honest but not cruel. Papa and I are having some problems, my love, but it has nothing to do with you. You and your sister are the most loved children in the world. Céliane looked at her with those two wise eyes. Is it because of grand-mère? Estelle's breath caught. She hadn't realized her daughter understood so much. It's complicated, Estelle said carefully. But I promise you, everything I'm doing is to make sure you and Maëlys have what you need. You deserve to feel safe and loved and fed. And I'm going to make sure that happens, no matter what. Céliane hugged her mother tightly. I love you, Maman. I love you too, my heart, Estelle whispered back, blinking away tears. That night, after the girls were asleep, Estelle sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea she couldn't afford and thought about the price of truth. She had always believed that speaking up would make things worse, that silence was safer than conflict. But she was learning that silence had its own cost, a cost paid in dignity and self-respect, and the slow erosion of everything that made her human. Fighting back was terrifying, but staying silent had been killing her. And she had finally decided that fear was a price she was willing to pay if it meant her daughters could grow up believing their needs mattered. The courthouse was a gray building in the 4th arrondissement, all marble and authority. Estelle wore the only professional dress she owned, a navy blue sheath she had bought 5 years ago for a job interview she never got. Maître Rousseau met her outside, carrying a leather briefcase stuffed with documents. Remember, the lawyer said, stay calm, answer questions directly. Don't let him provoke you. Estelle nodded, her throat too tight to speak. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than she expected. Matthieu sat on the other side with his lawyer, an expensive-looking man in a tailored suit. Giselle sat behind them, her face a mask of righteous indignation. She was dressed all in black, as if attending a funeral. Estelle realized with a bitter laugh that in a way she was, the funeral of her control over Matthieu's life. The judge was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes. She reviewed the documents in silence while everyone waited. Then she looked up at Matthieu. Monsieur Blanchard, can you explain why you purchased a 40,000 euro vehicle for your mother while your children lacked adequate food and clothing? Matthieu's lawyer started to speak, but the judge held up her hand. I asked your client, not you. Matthieu shifted in his seat. My mother raised me alone. She sacrificed everything after my father died. I was simply showing gratitude. The judge interrupted. That's admirable. But you also have a legal obligation to support your minor children. Did you consider their needs before making this purchase? Matthieu's jaw tightened. My wife exaggerates. The children never went without food. She's trying to make me look bad because she's angry I'm close to my mother. Maître Rousseau stood. Your Honor, we have documentation showing that Madame Blanchard's bank account has been repeatedly overdrawn. We have receipts showing she was forced to use food banks. We have testimony from the children's school expressing concern about their appearance and nutrition. Meanwhile, bank statements show Monsieur Blanchard has transferred over 50,000 euros to his mother in the past year alone. This is not about gratitude. This is about financial abuse.
The judge ordered a recess. Estelle sat in the hallway with Maître Rousseau, her hands shaking. You did well, the lawyer said. He's making himself look worse with every word. But Estelle didn't feel victorious. She felt exhausted, like she had been running uphill for years and had finally stopped only to realize how far she had fallen. When they returned, the judge had reviewed additional documents. She looked at Matthieu with barely concealed disgust. Monsieur Blanchard, I have here statements showing you purchased luxury items for your mother, vacations, jewelry, furniture, while your children wore second-hand clothes. Can you explain this discrepancy? Matthieu's lawyer tried again. Your Honor, my client has a deep emotional bond with his mother due to childhood trauma. Childhood trauma does not absolve him of parental responsibility, the judge snapped. I don't care if his mother raised him in a palace or a cardboard box. His children are living in poverty while he funds his mother's lifestyle. That is unconscionable. She turned to Estelle. Madame Blanchard, what are you asking for? Estelle stood slowly, finding her voice. I want my children to have food, clothing, and security. I want them to grow up knowing they matter. And I want a divorce. The word hung in the air like a bell that couldn't be unrung. Matthieu's face went white. You can't be serious? You're going to throw away our marriage over this? Over money? Estelle looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in years. She saw a man who had never grown up, who had replaced his father with his mother and expected his wife to compete for scraps of affection. She saw a man who valued comfort over responsibility, appearance over substance, control over love. This was never about money, Estelle said quietly. This was about whether my children mattered as much as your mother's ego. And you chose. Every day for 7 years, you chose. So yes, I'm throwing away our marriage, because it died the first time you told me I didn't matter. The judge nodded slowly, making notes. I'm ordering immediate child support, retroactive 6 months. I'm also ordering a full financial audit of all transfers to Giselle Blanchard. If it's determined that funds meant for the family were diverted, there will be consequences. Matthieu's lawyer leaned over, whispering urgently. Giselle stood up from her seat, her voice shrill. This is outrageous! I'm being punished for accepting help from my own son? The judge's eyes snapped toward her. Madame Blanchard, sit down. If you interrupt these proceedings again, I will have you removed. Giselle sat, her face purple with rage. Estelle felt something unfamiliar blooming in her chest. It took her a moment to recognize it. Hope. The weeks following the hearing were the hardest of Estelle's life. Matthieu was ordered to pay child support, but he fought it with every tool he had. He claimed poverty, despite bank statements showing otherwise. He claimed Estelle was vindictive, trying to poison his relationship with his children. He claimed Giselle was sick and needed his financial support more than his daughters needed new shoes. But the judge had seen through him. The child support payments started arriving. Not as much as Estelle needed, but enough to buy groceries without panic. Enough to pay the electricity bill on time. Enough to let Céline and Maëlys have seconds at dinner. The first night they had a full meal.
Estelle sat at the table watching her daughters eat chicken and vegetables and fresh bread, and she cried into her napkin. Giselle launching a campaign of harassment. She called Estelle at all hours, leaving venomous messages. She showed up at the girls' school trying to take them without permission. She spread rumors in the neighborhood that Estelle was a gold digger who had trapped Matthieu with pregnancy and was now stealing from a poor widow. Maître Rousseau filed a restraining order. The judge granted it immediately. Matthieu came to see the girls once during those weeks. He took them to a park and bought them ice cream, then spent the entire time complaining about their mother. "She's making things very difficult for us," he told Céline. "If she would just be reasonable, we should be a family again." Céline, wise beyond her years, looked at him with her mother's eyes. "Papa, why did you buy Grand-mère a car but not us food?" Matthieu had no answer. Estelle started rebuilding her life piece by piece. She updated her portfolio, reaching out to old contacts in graphic design. She found a part-time remote job that paid just enough to supplement the child support. She started therapy, working through years of trauma and self-doubt. She joined a support group for women leaving abusive relationships and learned that financial abuse was just as devastating as physical violence. Slowly, painfully, she began to recognize herself again.
Giselle refused to accept defeat. She hired a private investigator to follow Estelle, looking for evidence of moral failure, another man, substance abuse, anything that could be used to paint her as an unfit mother. The investigator found nothing because there was nothing to find. Estelle's life consisted of work, children, and survival. But Giselle wasn't deterred. She escalated. One evening, Estelle came home to find her apartment had been broken into. Nothing valuable was taken. She had nothing valuable. But her documents were scattered, her children's toys broken, and a message written on the bathroom mirror in red lipstick. "Bad mothers lose their children." Estelle called the police immediately. The fingerprints matched Giselle's. The judge was not amused. At the next hearing, Giselle was ordered to undergo a psychological evaluation and was banned from any contact with Estelle or the children. Matthieu sat silently, his face a mask of shame. For the first time, Estelle saw a crack in his armor, a moment of realization that his mother's behavior was indefensible, that he had enabled something monstrous. But the crack closed quickly. After the hearing, Matthieu approached Estelle in the hallway. "You've destroyed my family," he said quietly. Estelle looked at him with pity. "No, Matthieu, your mother destroyed your family 30 years ago when she decided to make you her emotional husband instead of her son. I'm just the first person to say it out loud." He had no response. He walked away, shoulders slumped, following his mother out of the courthouse like a child following his parent. Estelle watched him go and felt nothing, no love, no anger, no regret, just relief that she would never again have to shrink herself to fit into someone else's broken family.
6 months after the first hearing, the divorce was finalized. Matthieu was ordered to pay child support and split custody, though he rarely used his allotted time with the girls. Giselle was forbidden from contact. The silver car, Estelle learned, had been repossessed after Matthieu stopped making payments. The luxury apartment in the 16th arrondissement was being sold to cover debts. Karma, Estelle thought, had a poetic sense of timing. Estelle's graphic design work picked up. She started getting regular clients, building a reputation for reliable, creative work. She moved to a small but sunlit apartment in the 19th arrondissement with 2 bedrooms and a balcony where the girls could play. It wasn't much, that it was theirs, paid for with money she earned, in a space where no one could make her feel small. So Jan and Maëlys thrived. They joined a local sports club, made new friends, and slowly stopped asking when Papa would come home. Estelle watched them laugh and play with a freedom they had never had before, and she realized that her fight had given them something more valuable than money. It had given them the knowledge that their mother would always protect them, always fight for them, always believe they deserved better. One evening, Estelle received a letter from Matthieu. It was short, handwritten on plain paper. "I'm sorry," it said. "I was right about everything. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I finally see what I did to you. To our daughters, I'm in therapy. I'm trying to become the man I should have been." Estelle read it twice, then folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. Maybe one day it would mean something. But today, it was just words from a man who had learned too late that love isn't about sacrifice. It's about choosing the right people to sacrifice for. She returned to the balcony where the girls were drawing with chalk, their laughter floating on the evening air. The Paris skyline spread out before them, painted in sunset colors, gold and pink and purple. Estelle breathed in deeply, feeling the weight she had carried for years finally lifting from her shoulders. She wasn't healed yet. Healing would take time. But she was free. And freedom, she was learning, was the first step toward becoming whole. A year after the divorce, Estelle received an unexpected phone call. It was Matthieu, his voice shaking. "My mother is dying. She wants to see the girls." Estelle's first instinct was to refuse. But Céline and Maëlys were older now, old enough to have opinions about their grandmother. She asked them, and surprisingly, Céline said she wanted to go. "I want to ask her why," she said simply. "Why she hurt you, why she hurt us." They went to the hospital together. Estelle, Céline, and Maëlys. Giselle looked small in the hospital bed, diminished by illness and age. When she saw them, tears ran down her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I was so afraid of losing my son that I destroyed his family. I turned him into someone weak and selfish, and I hurt innocent children. I'm so sorry." Céline looked at her grandmother with the same unflinching honesty she had inherited from Estelle. "You scared me. You made my mama cry. You made Papa choose you instead of us. Why?" Giselle closed her eyes, tears streaming. "Because I was selfish. Because I was lonely. Because I thought if I kept your father dependent on me, I would never be alone. But I was wrong. I was so wrong." Estelle stood at the foot of the bed, watching this woman who had caused her so much pain, finally confronted by the truth. She felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only sadness for the years wasted, the love lost, the family broken by fear masquerading as devotion. "I forgive you," Estelle said quietly. "Not for you, for me, so I can finally let go of the anger." Giselle nodded, unable to speak. 3 days later, she died. At the funeral, Matthieu approached Estelle. "Thank you for bringing them, for letting her say goodbye." Estelle nodded. "I didn't do it for her, and I didn't do it for you. I did it so my daughters would never wonder if they should have been there. But this is the last time, Matthieu. After today, we're done with your family's drama. My girls deserve peace." 2 years after the divorce, Estelle stood in front of a mirror, barely recognizing the woman looking back. She had cut her hair short, a practical bob that made her look younger and more confident. She had gained weight, healthy weight, from eating regular meals. She had laugh lines around her eyes from evenings spent giggling with her daughters. She looked, she realized with wonder, happy. Her graphic design business had grown. She now had 3 regular clients and was training a young intern. Céline was excelling in school, showing a talent for mathematics that made Estelle's heart swell with pride. Maëlys had discovered a love of dance and performed in a local recital with grace that brought tears to Estelle's eyes. They had built a life, not perfect, not easy, but theirs. Matthieu sent child support on time now. He saw the girls twice a month,
taking them for subdued visits where he actually listened to them instead of complaining about their mother. He had finally started therapy, working through the codependency Giselle had instilled in him. He would never be the man Estelle once hoped he would be, but he was trying to be a decent father, and that was enough. Estelle started dating again. Nothing serious, just coffee with a kind man who worked at the library and made her laugh. She wasn't ready for love, might never be ready again, but she was open to companionship, to conversation, to the possibility that not all men were like Matthieu. The girls liked him. "He's nice to you, Mama," Céline said approvingly. "He doesn't make you sad." Such a low bar, Estelle thought. But after years of living below ground, even low bars looked like mountains. One evening, as she tucked her daughters into bed, Maëlys asked, "Mama, are you happy now?" Estelle thought about the question carefully. Was she happy? She still had bad days. She still struggled financially sometimes. She still carried scars from years of being told she didn't matter. But when she looked at her daughters, healthy, confident, loved, and when she looked at herself, strong, independent, free, she knew the answer. "Yes, my love," she said, kissing her daughter's forehead. "I'm happy. Finally, I'm happy." She turned off the light and stood in the doorway watching them sleep. Tomorrow she would wake up and make breakfast and go to work and come home and help with homework and kiss scraped knees and read bedtime stories. Ordinary things. Simple things. But after years of extraordinary suffering, ordinary felt like a miracle. She had fought for this life, this peaceful, stable, ordinary life, and she had won. Not because she was stronger than Matthieu or Giselle, but because she had finally believed what her daughters had needed her to know all along. She mattered. Her needs mattered. Her voice mattered. And no one, not a husband, not a mother-in-law, not anyone, could take that away from her ever again.